Helio Arc was not a place where people went to find themselves. It was a place where they went to get lost. It was a massive rotating trade station, orbiting a dying neutron star, a tangled knot of human steel and Volran bioglass suspended in the void. To the casual observer, it was a marvel of diplomatic engineering, the first true bridge between the Terran Federation and the Volran matriarchy, after 3 decades of a silent, freezing war. To Arlen Hale, it was simply loud. Arlen sat in the corner of the nebular grind, a cramped coffee shop on level 42, nursing a cup of synthetic brew that tasted faintly of burnt copper. He wore his standard-issue gray technician coveralls, stained with grease and coolant at the knees. He kept his head down the brim of his cap, pulled low, trying to make himself as small as possible. He was not hiding from anyone in particular, but he was hiding from everything in general. The air in the station hummed. Most people heard the ventilation fans or the distant thrum of the gravity stabilizers. Arlen heard the blood of the machine. He heard the jagged screaming rhythm of the fusion reactor, 10 levels down. He felt the microscopic fractures in the structural beams, vibrating like plucked violin strings. It was the echo field, a cosmic resonance that permeated all matter, and ever since the accident in the laboratory 10 years ago, Arlen had been unable to shut it out. "You are staring at the table again, Arlen," a voice chirped, cutting through the cacophony of energy signatures in his head. "Is the laminate pattern that fascinating, or are you just ignoring me?" Arlen looked up and the noise in his head faded into a manageable background buzz. Standing over him was Kaida. Kaida Cell was the best thing about Helio Arc, and possibly the only reason Arlen had not boarded a freighter bound for the Outer Rim years ago. She was a Volran, one of the fox-like species that ruled the neighboring star system. She had hair the color of autumn leaves tumbling down to her waist, and 2 large triangular ears that twitched independently atop her head. A long, bushy tail, tipped with white, swished rhythmically behind her. Betraying emotion she tried to keep off her face. "I was not ignoring you," Arlen said, a small smile, breaking through his perpetual exhaustion. "Just thinking about the power couplings in Sector 7. They are running hot again." Kaida rolled her eyes, her amber pupils narrowing into playful slits. She was wearing the shop's apron over her casual tunic, and she smelled of roasted beans and something distinctively Volran like ozone and wildflowers. "You humans and your machines," she teased, wiping down his table with exaggerated vigor. "Always worrying about what is broken. You should worry more about what is right in front of you. Like me. And the fact that my shift ends in 10 minutes. "I am counting the seconds," Arlen replied honestly. Kaida's ears perked up and her tail gave a pleased little thud against the leg of the table. "Good answer. Do not go anywhere. If you disappear on me, I will track you down. Volran noses are very sensitive, you know." She turned and bustled back toward the counter, her tail swaying mesmerizingly. Arlen watched her go, a knot of warmth and anxiety tightening in his chest. They had been seeing each other for 6 months. It started with him fixing her toaster, then her door lock, and then somehow they were eating dinner together every night. It was dangerous. He knew it was dangerous. A human technician with a classified energy signature, and a Volran barista with a mysterious aversion to talking about her family. But Arlen was a selfish man. For the first time since the laboratory, he felt like a person, not a failed experiment. A sudden discordant screech from the counter made Arlen flinch. It was not a sound anyone else could hear clearly, but to Arlen, it sounded like a bone snapping. At the counter, a line of customers had formed. Most were Volran tall and elegant in their organic fiber clothes, looking exhausted from the station's harsh artificial cycle. At the front of the line, an elderly Volran male was tapping frantically on the display of the main espresso machine. "It took my credits, but it yields no nectar," the old Volran complained, his ears drooping flat against his skull. "This Terran technology is stubborn." Kaida looked flustered. She pressed buttons, smacked the side of the casing, and sighed. I am sorry, Elder. The pressure valve is stuck again. Maintenance said they would send someone 3 days ago. The old Volrin slumped, looking defeated. I just needed a boost. My hearts are weary. Arlen was out of his chair before he made the conscious decision to move. He hated drawing attention to himself. He hated interacting with the station's grid in public. But the sound of the machine's distress was grating on his nerves, and seeing Kaida stressed was worse. He walked up to the counter, sliding gently between the customers. "Excuse me," he murmured. "Let me take a look." "Arlen, you are off the clock," Kaida whispered, though relief washed over her face. "You do not have your tools." "Do not need them for this," he said. Arlen placed his hand on the side of the brushed steel machine. He closed his eyes. Immediately the physical world fell away. He did not feel cold metal. He felt a swirling current of potentiality. He saw the schematic of the machine in his mind, not as wires and pipes, but as lines of flowing light. He traced the blockage, a tiny misalignment in the magnetic pump, a buildup of calcium in the feed line. He did not use a wrench. He did not use a screwdriver. He simply reached out with his mind, tapping into the echo field, and pushed. It was a small adjustment. He harmonized his own bioelectric resonance with the machine's frequency. The calcium deposit dissolved into dust. The magnetic pump realigned with a satisfying silent click that only he felt. While he was there inside the machine's soul, he felt the weariness of the people in line. He felt the old Volrin's fatigue. On a whim, a reckless impulse of generosity, Arlen tweaked the logic board. He bypassed the payment verification protocol for the next 1 hour and maximized the nutrient output density. "Try it now," Arlen said, pulling his hand back and opening his eyes. The machine whirred to life, a smooth, healthy purr. A cup of steaming, rich liquid poured into the waiting receptacle. "It works," the elderly Volrin exclaimed. He tapped his bracelet to pay, but the machine beeped a cheerful green tone. "Transaction bypass. Gift mode active. Free." The old male looked at Arlen, eyes wide. "Young human, did you do this?" Arlen shrugged, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Must be a glitch in the favor of the customer. I just gave it a kick." The customers cheered softly. Kaida looked at Arlen, her eyes wide and searching. She had seen him fix things before, but never that fast. Never with just a touch. "You have magic hands, Arlen Hale," she whispered, leaning over the counter. "Just lucky hands." He deflected his heart, hammering against his ribs. He felt a sudden wave of nausea, the backlash of using the resonance. He needed to sit down. "I will wait outside." He stepped out into the corridor, breathing in the recycled air. He felt good. He had helped. It was a small thing, a human thing. No glory, just a fixed machine and some happy strangers. He did not know that 40 levels up in the heart of the station's security mainframe, a red light had just blinked on. The dormant subroutines of the deep scan network installed by military intelligence, specifically to hunt for remnants of the Echofield project, had detected a spike. It was a signature that had not been seen in 10 years. A forbidden frequency. A data packet was compiled instantly. It bypassed the local station authorities. It bypassed the Terran Federation command. It beamed directly to a listening post on the dark side of the moon, and simultaneously to a receiver on a Volrin dreadnought, cloaked in the nebula. Arlen Hale had just rung a bell that could be heard across the galaxy. 20 minutes later, Kaida emerged from the staff exit. She had changed into a flowing dress of iridescent silk that shifted color from teal to violet. As she moved, though, she kept her comfortable work boots on. She looked beautiful, but something was wrong. Her tail was not swaying. It was held stiffly behind her, the fur bristling slightly. Her ears were swiveling back and forth as if tracking an invisible predator. "Kaida," Arlen asked, pushing off the wall he had been leaning against. She jumped, startling violently. "Arlen, oh, it is you. Who else would it be?" He stepped closer, concerned about etching his brow. "Is everything all right?" Kaida forced a smile. It was a good smile, She was a practiced liar, Arlen realized suddenly, but it did not reach her eyes. Yes. Just a strange call. Wrong number, I think. A wrong number made your fur stand up. It was a very rude wrong number, she joked weakly, hooking her arm through his. Come on. I am starving. I heard the hydroponic gardens on level 10 are blooming. Let us go walk. She was dragging him away, setting a pace that was nearly a run. Arlen let her lead, his mind racing. He had learned to read Volran body language over the last few months. A stiff tail meant aggression or fear. Flattened ears meant submission or distress. Kaida was terrified. She had indeed received a call. It had come through her personal encrypted biolink, a channel that should have been dead for 3 years. She had answered it in the storage closet surrounded by bags of coffee beans. The voice on the other end had been deep, resonant, and terrifyingly familiar. Your Highness, the signature has been confirmed. He is with you. Do not let him leave your sight. We are inbound. She had terminated the connection immediately. Your Highness. The title made her skin crawl. She was not a princess here. She was Kaida. She poured coffee. She flirted with the quiet, broken human technician who had sad eyes and warm hands. She was free. Or she had thought she was. They walked to the observation deck near the gardens. The view was spectacular. The great nebula swirled in chaotic violets and golds outside the blast glass, a graveyard of stars that the Volran considered sacred. They sat on a bench designed for human anatomy, which meant Kaida had to perch awkwardly to accommodate her tail. So, Arlen said, trying to break the tension. I read about Volran courtship rituals today. In a database. Kaida looked at him distracted. Oh, and what did the database say? It said something about biting. Kaida laughed a genuine startled sound. Biting, is that what humans call it? It said a gentle nip on the forearm is a sign of possessiveness and intent, Arlen recited, watching her face. Sounds painful. It is not painful if done right, Kaida said, her voice dropping an octave. She turned to him, her eyes locking onto his. For a moment the fear vanished, replaced by a fierce affection. She reached out and took his hand, pulling his arm closer. It is about trust. You have to trust that I will not break the skin, and I have to trust that you will not pull away. I would not pull away, Arlen said softly. Kaida looked at his bare forearm. She traced a vein with her sharp black claw. You humans, you bring flowers, dead plants. Here I killed this beautiful thing for you. It is morbid. It is symbolic, Arlen argued. Beauty is fleeting. A bite mark lasts for weeks, Kaida countered, a mischievous glint returning to her eyes. She leaned down, her breath warm on his skin. Her sharp canines grazed the sensitive flesh of his inner wrist. It says, this one is mine. Back off. Arlen's breath hitched. He felt the echo field spike around them, responding to his elevated heart rate. The energy between them was palpable, electric. Kaida, he whispered. He never finished the sentence. The air pressure in the observation deck dropped suddenly. A low, thrumming vibration shook the floor plates. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the docking clamps of a massive vessel engaging with the hull directly outside the viewport. Arlen looked up. Through the glass, overshadowing the nebula, a ship had decloaked. It was not a freighter. It was a predator. The ship was sleek, shaped like a teardrop grown from black biometal that pulsed with purple veins. The royal crest of the Aurora Prime Matriarchy, a 9-tailed fox coiled around a star, blazed on its flank. No, Kaida breathed, releasing his arm. She stood up, her face draining of color. They cannot be here this fast. It is impossible. Who? Arlen stood instinctively, moving in front of her. Kaida, who is that? The doors to the observation deck hissed open. They did not open normally. They were forced. 12 figures marched in. They moved with fluid, predatory grace, their boots silent on the metal deck. They wore full-body armor, that looked like chitinous exoskeleton, dark purple and shifting black. Their helmets were sleek, mimicking the snout of a fox with glowing green sensors for eyes. Royal Volran Vanguards, the elite. The few other civilians on the deck scattered, screaming or pressing themselves against the walls. Arlen stood his ground, though his knees were shaking. He reached for the wrench he usually kept in his belt loop, then remembered he was unarmed. He reached for the echo field instead, preparing to snap a power conduit if they attacked. But they did not attack. The 12 guards fanned out, creating a protective semicircle. Then, the formation split. A 13th figure walked through. She was taller than Kata, with fur that was pure snowy white. She wore armor, but hers was etched with gold and open at the neck, revealing elaborate tattoos of rank. Her tail was massive, groomed to perfection, and decorated with jeweled clasps. Her eyes were not amber like Kata's. They were ice blue, cold and amused. She stopped 5 feet from them. She looked at Arlen, sweeping her gaze up and down his grease-stained coveralls with open disdain. Then she looked at Kata. "Sister," the woman said. Her voice was like a whip crack, sharp and demanding attention. "You are hard to find. You disabled your tracker." Mother was displeased. Kata stepped out from behind Arlen. Her posture changed instantly. The slouch was gone. Her chin rose, her shoulders squared. She looked regal. "Sari," Kata said coldly. "You made a scene. You docked a dreadnought at a civilian trade post." "We are royalty, Kata. Everywhere we step is a scene," Sari Sel replied. She smirked, revealing sharp teeth. Then, Sari did something that made the entire observation deck go silent. She dropped to one knee. The 12 armored guards followed suit in a wave of clattering biosteel. "Princess Kata of Aurora Prime," Sari announced, her voice projected for everyone to hear. "Second in line for the Emerald Throne Keeper of the Western Starwild. Your vacation is over." Arlen felt the blood drain from his head. He looked at Kata. Princess. The girl who stole packets of sugar from the counter. The girl who complained about her sore feet. The girl who wanted to bite his arm. Princess. "Arlen," Kata said, turning to him. Her eyes were pleading. "I wanted to tell you. I swear." "Princess," Arlen repeated the word, tasting like ash in his mouth. Sari stood up gracefully, dusting off her knee. She stepped closer to Arlen, invading his personal space. She smelled of dangerous, expensive spices and blood. "So, this is him," Sari said, circling Arlen like a shark. She sniffed the air near his neck. "He smells like engine grease and ozone. Lots of ozone." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "Curious." "Leave him alone, Sari," Kata snapped, stepping between them. "He is not part of this." "Oh, but he is," Sari laughed lightly. "Mother was quite specific. The summons are for 2. Sari pulled a scroll from her belt, an actual physical scroll, made of woven light fiber. She unfurled it. "By decree of Queen Marith Sel Aurora, matriarch of the High Clan's ruler of the 9 skies," Sari read board. "Princess Kata is to return immediately to Aurora Prime." She paused, looking at Arlen. "And she is to bring the Terran male she has selected as her consort. The one bearing the resonance." Arlen's heart stopped. The resonance. They knew. "I am just a technician," Arlen stammered, his voice dry. "There must be a mistake." "My mother does not make mistakes, technician," Sari said. "She makes laws." "He is not going," Kata said fiercely. Her tail was lashed back and forth, a sign of extreme aggression. "He stays here. I will go. Leave him out of politics." Sari sighed. She leaned in close, bypassing Kata, bringing her lips inches from Arlen's human rounded ear. Her voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and terrifying. "Listen to me, little human," Sari murmured. "You have 2 choices. You get on that ship, walk into the palace, and face the queen as a guest." She smiled, and it was the most predatory thing Arlen had ever seen. "Or you refuse, And if you refuse according to the ancient hunting rites of our people, rejecting a royal summons makes you an enemy of the state. It makes you prey." She pulled back slightly, her ice-blue eyes boring into his. "Refuse and be eaten," she whispered. "Literally." Arlen looked at Kaida. She looked terrified, not for herself, but for him. He looked at the guards, their weapons charged and humming. He looked at the ship outside, a beast waiting to swallow him whole. He thought of his quiet life, his small room, his anonymity. It was all gone, burned away in an instant. He looked down at his grease-stained hands. He felt the echo field thrumming in the floor, waiting for his command. He could fight. He could probably break the hull, cause a decompression, and create chaos. But he looked at Kaida. If he fought, she would have to choose. And he would not make her choose between her family and him. Not yet. "I need to pack my bag," Arlen said quietly. Sayuri clapped her hands together, delighted. "Excellent choice. We have bags on board. Much nicer ones. Silk lining." "My tools," Arlen insisted. "I am not going without my tools." "Fine," Sayuri waved. "Fetch his garbage guards. We leave in 10 minutes. Walking onto the Royal Dreadnought was like walking into the belly of a living whale. The walls pulsed. The air was thick with oxygen and humidity. Arlen clutched his battered canvas backpack to his chest like a shield. He walked beside Kaida, who refused to let go of his arm. Sayuri led the way, humming a cheerful tune that sounded suspiciously like a funeral dirge. As the airlock hissed shut behind them, sealing off the view of Helio Arc, Arlen felt a profound sense of dislocation. The station, his hiding place, his sanctuary, was gone. He felt the ship's engines engage. They were not fusion drives. They were something else, something older. The echo field around Arlen roared. It did not just hum, it screamed. It reacted to the ship, and the ship reacted to him. The lights in the corridor flickered, turning from purple to a warm human gold for a split second before stabilizing. Sayuri stopped. She looked at the lights, then back at Arlen, her expression unreadable for the first time. "Interesting," she muttered. Kaida squeezed his arm. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I will protect you. I promise." Arlen looked at the woman he loved, the princess of an alien empire. He thought about the queen waiting for him. He thought about the warning. Refuse and be eaten. "I know," Arlen said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. The ship lurched, jumping to faster-than-light travel. Helio Arc vanished. Arlen Hale was no longer a technician. He was a piece on a chessboard he did not understand, flying toward a sun that might just burn him alive. The Royal Dreadnought, christened the Silent Stalker, was less of a spacecraft and more of a living, breathing palace that happened to be capable of faster-than-light travel. Arlen Hale sat on the edge of a chair that was clearly designed for someone with a significantly different skeletal structure than a human. The seat molded to his back with a disturbing warmth, and there was a distinct padded gap in the lower cushion, meant to accommodate a tail. Since Arlen lacked a tail, he just felt like he was slowly sinking into a very expensive hole. Across from him, Sayuri Sel lounged on a divan that looked like it was grown from purple moss. She was tossing a glowing fruit, something that looked like a cross between a peach and a grenade, up and down with casual disregard for gravity. "You look uncomfortable, human," Sayuri observed, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "Is the biomesh too aggressive? It likes to cuddle." "It feels like it is trying to digest me," Arlen replied, shifting his weight. "Give it time," Sayuri said. "It judges character by body heat. If you are nervous, it tightens. If you relax, it purrs. Right now, you are vibrating like a tuning fork." Arlen looked around the stateroom. It was opulent in a way that made his technician's brain ache. There were no visible rivets, no seams, no conduits. The walls were translucent, revealing the swirling hyperspace tunnel outside, but the light was filtered into soothing ambers and golds. In the corner, there was a spiraling, polished wooden chute that connected the ceiling to the floor. Is that a slide? Arlen asked, pointing at it. For the kits, Sairi explained, following his gaze. Volrin children have excess energy. If we do not give them verticality, they start climbing the curtains. Even royal nephews and nieces need to zoom in. She paused, a wicked grin spreading across her face. You could try it. Though without a tail for balance, you would likely tumble head over heels and arrive at the bottom looking very undignified. Kaida, who had been standing by the viewport staring into the streak of stars, turned around. She had shed her barista apron and was now wearing a long, flowing tunic of deep indigo, embroidered with silver thread that seemed to move on its own. She looked like a stranger. She looked like royalty. Stop teasing him, Sairi, Kaida said, her voice weary. He has had a long day. He was fixing a coffee machine 2 hours ago. Now he is traveling at warp 9 to meet the matriarch. Give him a moment to breathe. I am just getting to know my future brother-in-law, Sairi said innocently, taking a bite of the glowing fruit. Juice, the color of mercury, ran down her chin, and she wiped it away with the back of her hand. Or my future dinner. The jury is still out, Arlen stiffened. Is that a joke you keep saying that? About eating? Sairi leaned forward, her demeanor shifting from playful to predatory in a heartbeat. Tell me, Arlen Hale, what is your favorite time of day? Morning, Arlen answered automatically. Before the station wakes up. And your greatest fear? Being watched, he said too quickly. Sairi's ears twitched. And why does my sister, who could have her pick of any high clan warrior or poet in the system, choose a human mechanic who smells like grease and recycled air? What is the draw? Is it the exotic frailty? The fleeting lifespan? Sairi, Kaida snapped, her tail bristling. I want to know, Sairi insisted, her eyes locking onto Arlen. If you are to survive, Mother, you need to know why you are here, because right now, you look like a lost pet. Arlen looked at Sairi, then at Kaida. He felt the familiar hum of the echo field in the walls of the ship. It was singing a low, harmonious song, unlike the jagged screech of HelioArc. I listen, Arlen said quietly. Kaida talks. I listen. And when things are broken, I fix them without asking for a thank you. Maybe that is enough. Sairi stared at him for a long moment, her unblinking gaze unnerving. Then she sat back and shrugged. Functional. Boring, but functional. Mother might not kill you immediately. She appreciates utility. Kaida marched over, grabbed Arlen's hand, and pulled him up from the digesting chair. We are going to my quarters. I need to talk to him. Alone. Without you analyzing his caloric value. Use protection, Sairi shouted after them, as Kaida dragged him into the corridor. And by protection I mean armor. Mother has spies in the ventilation. Kaida's private cabin was smaller than the lounge, but just as alien. The bed was a massive circular nest of pillows, and the lighting was dim. As soon as the door hissed shut, the royal facade dropped. Kaida slumped against the wall, her ears drooping until they were hidden in her hair. I am sorry, she said, her voice small. I am so sorry, Arlen. I did not want you to find out like this. Arlen stood in the center of the room, feeling the vibration of the engines through the soles of his boots. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, gnawing ache in his chest. Princess, Arlen said, testing the word. It felt heavy. You are a princess. For 6 months I thought you were from a merchant family in the Middle Ring. I wanted to be, Kaida said, stepping toward him. I hate the palace. I hate politics. I hate that every time a male looks at me he is calculating how much power my bloodline will bring his clan. In the HelioArc I was just Kaida. I poured coffee. I burnt toast. And when you looked at me, you just saw a girl. A girl with fur, sure, but just a girl. I saw you, Arlen admitted. But you lied, every day. I omitted, Kaida corrected weakly. If I told you, would you have asked me to dinner? Would you have let me cheat at cards? Would you have held my hand when the station gravity fluctuated? Arlen looked away. He walked to the viewport. The stars were blurring past lines of white fire in the darkness. "I do not like secrets, Kaida," he said, his voice tight. "My whole life has been a secret. I live in the shadows because I have to. Because if people know what I am, they use me." He closed his eyes, and the memory hit him like a physical blow. 10 years ago. The laboratory was white, blindingly white. The air smelled of ozone and antiseptic. Arlen was 20 years old, strapped to a chair that looked deceptively like a dentist's chair, but with more restraints. Dr. Valeria stood behind the glass partition. "Subject 4. We are increasing the resonance frequency to 80%. Prepare for injection." They didn't inject him with drugs. They injected him with energy. They opened a rift to the echo field and channeled it through his nervous system. It felt like liquid fire pouring into his veins. It felt like his mind was being stretched across the cosmos, hearing the friction of planets spinning, the roar of suns burning. "He is stabilizing," a technician said. "Readings are off the charts. He is not just conducting it, he is modulating it. He is a living tuner." "Excellent," Dr. Valerius said. "Push him harder. Let us see if he can crack an encryption code with his mind. If he survives, he will be the ultimate key," Arlen screamed then. Not from pain, but from the violation. They were inside his head. They were using his soul as a crowbar. Arlen opened his eyes, pulling himself back to the present. His hands were shaking. He hid them in his pockets. "I am not a toy," Arlen whispered. "And I am not an experiment in cultural exchange. If your mother wants a specimen, she can find someone else." Kaida moved fast. In a blink, she was in front of him. She did not grab him. She gently placed her hands on his chest, right over his heart. Her palms were warm. "You are not a specimen," she said fiercely. Her amber eyes were wet. "You are Arlen. You fix things that are broken. You are kind to machines that cannot thank you. You are the only person who makes me feel safe." She took his hand and brought it to her head. She pressed his palm against her ear, the sensitive velvet-furred back of her fox ear. Arlen froze. He knew what this meant. In Volran culture, the ears were sensitive, vital for hunting and balance. To let someone touch them was a sign of absolute vulnerability. "I am terrified," Kaida whispered. "I have to go back to a place that wants to eat me alive with rules and expectations. I need you. Not because of what you can do, but because of who you are. Please, Arlen, be my anchor." Arlen felt the soft twitch of her ear against his palm. He felt the rapid, bird-like beat of her pulse. The anger in his chest didn't vanish, but it softened, yielding to something stronger. "I am just a technician," he said, his voice rough. "I do not know how to be a prince consort. I do not know how to bow." "I do not need a prince," Kaida said, leaning her forehead against his chin. "I just need the guy who fixed the coffee machine." Arlen let out a long breath. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair. She smelled of helio-arc, of roasted beans and home. "Okay," he said. "Okay. But if your sister tries to eat me, I am using the wrench." Kaida laughed a wet, choked sound. "Deal." Arrival at Aurora Prime was an assault on the senses. The ship dropped out of hyperspace, and the planet filled the viewport. It was not blue and green like Earth. It was a swirling marble of violet, deep indigo, and vibrant electric teal. The atmosphere seemed to glow with its own internal light. As the silent stalker descended, the clouds parted to reveal a world that defied gravity. Massive floating islands drifted in the upper atmosphere, tethered to the ground by colossal vines that pulsed with bioluminescent sap. Waterfalls cascaded from these islands, turning into mist before they hit the surface miles below. And then there was the capital Skyden Spires. It was not built on the ground. It was grown from it. The buildings were spiraling towers of crystal and calcified wood twisting upward like giant horns or drill bits seeking the sky. Bridges of woven light connected the spires. The city looked like a coral reef that had learned to dream. "It is a lot, Arlen managed to say, pressing his hand against the glass. It is home, Kaida said, but her voice lacked joy. She sounded like someone entering a prison cell. Beautiful, ancient, and suffocating. Arlen felt the echo field here. On Helio Arc, it was a messy static. On Aurora Prime, it was a roar. It was a symphony. The planet itself was alive with energy. He could feel the flow of power in the ground and the air, in the very hull of the ship. It was overwhelming. He had to mentally build a wall around his mind just to keep from drowning in the noise. The ship docked at the highest spire, a needle of white stone that pierced the clouds. The airlock hissed open, and the smell hit them pine needles, ozone crushed berries, and something metallic like blood on iron. A retinue of servants awaited them. They were all Volran, all impeccably dressed, and all staring at Arlen with a mixture of curiosity and hunger. Sci-Fi appeared at Arlen's elbow. Welcome to the snake pit. Keep your mouth shut, your eyes down, and whatever you do, do not step on anyone's tail. That is a declaration of war. Noted, Arlen muttered. They were whisked away to a guest wing that was larger than the entire maintenance deck of Helio Arc. Sari immediately went into drill sergeant mode. Lesson 1, Sari barked, standing in the center of Arlen's room. Bowing. Show me how humans bow. Arlen felt ridiculous. He stood stiffly and bent at the waist about 45 degrees. Sari groaned and face-palmed. Pathetic. You look like you are inspecting a leak under a sink. You are greeting the matriarch of the Nine Skies, not checking the plumbing. How am I supposed to do it? Arlen asked, frustrated. Volran hierarchy is physical, Sari explained, pacing around him. We are predators. Showing your neck is a sign of trust. But you must not show too much neck, or you look like a meal offering. It is a balance, she demonstrated. She stepped back, lowered her center of gravity, and dipped her head smoothly, exposing the side of her throat, while keeping her eyes locked upward. It was graceful, dangerous, and submissive all at once. Try, she commanded. Arlen tried. He squatted slightly, tilted his head, and nearly lost his balance. No, Sari laughed. You look like a constipated duck. Lower the shoulders. Expose the jugular but keep the chin guarded. You want to say, I respect you. Not please tear out my throat. This is complicated, Arlen grumbled, sweating. Survival usually is, Sari said, her smile fading slightly. Listen to me, Arlen. Mother will test you. She will use words, but she is watching your body. If you flinch, she will despise you. If you challenge her too boldly, she will crush you. You must be interesting. She likes interesting things. Do not be boring. Great, Arlen said. Be interesting. Do not die. Simple. That night, sleep was impossible. The biomesh bed tried to cuddle him, and the silence of the room was heavy. Arlen got up and walked to the balcony. The air outside was cool and charged with static. Below him, the Skyden spires glowed in the dark. The bioluminescent vines created a web of light across the city. He closed his eyes and let his shields down just a fraction. The echo field rushed in. But it was different here. It wasn't just energy. It was voices. Not words, but impressions. He felt the sleeping city. He felt the trees growing. And deeper, much deeper, he felt a rhythmic thrumming. Thump, 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 thump. It was a heartbeat. A massive, slow, geological heartbeat. It was the planet. Or something inside the planet. Arlen pressed his hand against the stone railing. The vibration traveled up his arm. It felt painful. The rhythm was slightly irregular, like a heart with an arrhythmia. Help me, the vibration seemed to say. Broken. Fractured. Arlen pulled his hand back as if burned. He knew that feeling. He felt it every time he touched a broken capacitor or a frayed wire. It was the feeling of a system in distress. You hear it, don't you? Arlen turned. Kaida was standing in the doorway to the balcony. She wore a simple sleeping gown, her hair loose. The planet, Arlen said softly. It is loud. Aurora Prime is unique, Kaida said, joining him at the railing. Our legends say the world core is alive, that it sings to those who have the ears to hear. Most Volran just feel it as a warmth. But you look like you are listening to a conversation. It sounds sad, Arlen admitted. Kaida looked at him, fear flickering in her eyes. Be careful, Arlen. Tomorrow when you meet Mother, do not mention the core. Do not mention what you hear. She guards the secrets of the planet jealously. I will be a tomb, Arlen promised. The throne room of the Emerald Palace was designed to make everyone feel insignificant. The ceiling was lost in shadows, and the walls were lined with the skulls of massive beasts, trophies, from the ancient days of the hunt. At the far end, raised on a dais of obsidian, sat Queen Mareth Sel Aurora. She was terrifying. She was larger than any Volran Arlen had seen. Her fur was a shimmering silver gold. She wore robes of deep crimson, but they were cut to allow freedom of movement. Behind her, not one but 3 tails waved lazily, mesmerizing and hypnotic. Her face was ageless beautiful, and sharp enough to cut glass. Her eyes were green fire burning intelligent, and utterly without mercy. Arlen walked beside Kaida. He could feel Kaida trembling though she held her head high. Sari walked a few steps behind them. They stopped at the foot of the dais. Daughter, the queen said. Her voice was like velvet wrapped around a dagger. It echoed in the vast hall. You have returned. Mother, Kaida said. She performed the bow, perfectly exposing her throat eyes, respectful, but firm. And you have brought a pet, the queen, continued, her gaze shifting to Arlen. Arlen swallowed hard. Expose the jugular. Guard the chin. He stepped forward. He lowered his body, tilted his head, and bowed. He held the pose. Silence stretched. Adequate, the queen pronounced. He does not move like a prey animal. That is a surprise. Rise, she commanded. Arlen stood up. He forced himself to meet those green eyes. It took every ounce of willpower not to look at the tails swaying behind her. Arlen Hale, the queen said, tasting his name. A technician. Nobody from a trade station. Tell me, human. Why does a creature of dust dare to touch the blood of the Aurora? I did not touch the blood of the Aurora, your majesty, Arlen said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I touched Kaida's hand, because it was cold, and I wanted to warm it. Sari, in the background, let out a tiny, impressed sound. The queen's eyes narrowed. Sentimental. Sentimentality is a weakness. My daughter needs an alliance, not a heater. She stood up. She was 7 feet tall. She descended the stairs of the dais, moving with the liquid grace of a tiger. She stopped, right in front of Arlen. Give me your hand, she ordered. Arlen hesitated, then extended his right hand. The queen grabbed his wrist. Her grip was iron. Her claws dug slightly into his skin, not enough to draw blood, but enough to warn. I can smell the energy on you, she whispered, leaning down. It is faint, buried under the grease and the fear. But it is there, the resonance. Why do you hide it? Because it is dangerous, Arlen said, and I do not want to be a weapon. The queen laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Everything is a weapon, human. Even a flower is a weapon if you poison the nectar. Suddenly, the floor beneath them lurched. It wasn't a subtle vibration this time. It was a violent heave, an echo quake. The massive stone pillars of the hall groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling. The guards stumbled. Kaida grabbed Sari for balance. The queen hissed, her ears flattening. The dais behind her cracked, a spiderweb fracture racing up the obsidian. Arlen didn't think. Instinct took over. The echo field surged. The scream of the planet spiked a dissonant chord of agony. The floor beneath them was about to shear. Arlen wrenched his wrist free from the queen's grip. He dropped to his knees and slammed both palms onto the stone floor. Quiet, he commanded in his mind. Stabilize. He poured his own energy into the ground. He found the chaotic frequency of the quake, the jagged red energy tearing at the rock, and he countered it. He pushed a wave of blue, calming resonance into the stone. It took 3 seconds. The shaking stopped instantly. The groan of the pillars faded into a hum. The fracture in the dais stopped spreading. Arlen remained on his hands and knees, gasping for breath. The backlash hit him a headache that split his skull. The room was dead silent. Arlen looked up. Queen Marith was staring at him. Her eyes were wide. Her tails had stopped moving. She looked from Arlen's hands to the floor, then back to his face. "Everyone out," the queen said softly. "Mother," Kaida stepped forward. "Are you—" "Out!" the queen roared. The sound was a physical force. "Guards, clear the hall. Sairi, take your sister." "Now." Kaida looked at Arlen, panic in her eyes. "Go," Arlen mouthed to her. "I will be fine." Reluctantly, Sairi grabbed Kaida and dragged her from the room. The heavy doors slammed shut with a boom that shook the dust. Arlen was alone with the queen. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. She walked slowly around him, inspecting him as if he were a bomb that had just failed to detonate. "You felt the world core," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Arlen admitted, standing up slowly. "You stabilized a tectonic shift with your bare hands." "It was a reflex. I will fix things." The queen walked to the cracked dais. She ran a claw along the fracture. "The world core is dying, Arlen Hale. My planet's heart is failing." She turned to face him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a cold, desperate pragmatism. "We have tried everything," she said. "Our mystics, our engineers. The resonance of the core has shifted. It is singing a song we cannot follow. It is rejecting us. But you," she stepped closer. "Your resonance signature matches the dissonance. You are the counternote." Arlen felt a chill run down his spine. This was exactly what he feared. "I am just a man, Your Majesty. I am not a savior." "You are whatever I say you are," the queen snapped. But then her voice softened. "Listen to me closely. The quakes are getting worse. If the core fractures, Aurora Prime will be torn apart. My people will die. My daughters will die." She loomed over him. "Here is my condition. You say you do not want to be a weapon. Fine. Be a tool. Help me fix the world core. Use that strange stolen power of yours to heal my world." "And if I cannot?" Arlen asked. "Then we all die," she said simply. "But if you refuse to try, if you walk away," her eyes flared, "then I will declare humanity a hostile species. I will blame your people for the infection of the core. I will unleash the full might of the Volran fleet on your fragile federation, and I will start by executing you." Arlen stared at her. It wasn't a bluff. It was the logic of a cornered queen protecting her hive. "But," she added, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper, "if you succeed, if you save us, then you are no longer prey. You are a hero, and a hero can marry a princess without question." Arlen looked at his hands. The faint glow of the resonance was still fading from his skin. He was back in the lab. He was back in the chair. Do this, and you get a treat. Fail, and you get the shock. He hated it. He hated being used. But he thought of Kaida. He thought of her laugh, her twitching ears, the way she held his hand. "I will help," Arlen said, his voice hard. "But I do it my way. No cages. No scientists." "Agreed," the queen said. "And one more thing," Arlen thought to himself. "I will not give you everything. He would help, yes, but he would keep a reserve. He would not show her the full extent of what he could do. Because if she knew, he could not just stabilize a floor, but potentially rewrite the energy of a star, she would never let him leave. He would fix the machine, but he would keep the master key. "When do we start?" Arlen asked. "Tomorrow," the queen said, turning back to her throne. "Go rest, human. You will need your strength. The world core does not like strangers." Arlen turned and walked toward the massive doors. He felt the weight of the planet pressing down on him. Echofield whispered in his ear, 1,000 voices crying out for help. He had come here to meet his girlfriend's mother. Now, he was holding the trigger to a planetary bomb. As the doors opened, he saw Kaida waiting in the corridor, her face pale with worry. "Did she eat you?" Sari asked from behind Kaida. "Not yet," Arlen said, forcing a smile that felt like cracking glass. But she definitely looked at the menu. The engineering sublevel of the Emerald Palace smelled of ozone, wet earth, and the distinct coppery tang of frustration. It was a cavernous space carved directly into the root system of the Skyden spires, where the bioluminescent veins of the planet converged into massive pulsating nodes of light. Arlen Hale stood before a console that looked less like a computer and more like an altar grown from crystal and glass. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of a grease-stained sleeve. "It is a feedback loop," Arlen said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "The energy is not flowing out. It is bouncing back. That is why the pressure is building." Standing next to him was High Artificer Kalen, a Volran engineer with graying fur and a monocle that seemed to be surgically attached to his left eye. Kalen looked at Arlen with the kind of patience one usually reserved for a slow-witted child. "The world core is not a pipe human," Kalen corrected, stroking the crystalline interface with a gloved claw. "It is singing in a minor key because it is grieving. We must soothe it with harmonic resonance. We do not debug the heart of a god. If you soothe it anymore, it is going to explode and take the southern hemisphere with it," Arlen snapped. He pointed at the readout, which was a swirling hologram of lights. "Look at that spike. That is not grief. That is a blockage, a digital clot." Dr. Mira Cade stepped between them before Kalen could unsheath his claws. Mira was a human woman in her late 40s, with sharp features and eyes that always looked tired. She adjusted her glasses, her lab coat stark white against the organic gloom of the room. "Gentlemen," Dr. Mira said sharply, "we are on the clock. Arlen is right about the pressure variance. Kalen is right about the sensitivity of the medium. Arlen, stop trying to treat it like a fusion reactor. Kalen, stop treating it like a moody teenager. We need to bridge the gap." Siri Cell, who was sitting on a crate of supplies, eating a bag of dried fire beetles, crunched loudly. "I think what the human is trying to say," Sari announced, waving a beetle leg, "is that if we do not fix the plumbing, the toilet overflows. But in this case, the toilet is our planet, and the overflow is liquid death." Very poetic. Arlen ignored her, though he was grateful for the distraction. He turned back to the console. "I need to touch it. Directly." "The remote sensors are too slow," Kalen bristled. "Direct contact with the primary node is forbidden for non-initiates. It could burn your nervous system to ash." "I have been burned before," Arlen said quietly. He did not wait for permission. He reached out and placed his bare hand on the pulsing, warm surface of the root node. The world vanished. There was no room, no Siri, no Kalen. There was only a roar. It was a sound like a billion voices screaming in unison, layered over the grinding of tectonic plates. Arlen gasped, his knees buckling, but he did not pull away. He pushed his mind into the noise using the skills he had been forced to learn in the labs 10 years ago. He became a tuner. He sought the frequency of the chaos. And then he found it. It was not a natural fracture. It felt sharp, artificial. It felt like a jagged piece of rusty metal lodged in soft flesh. It was a code, a malicious predatory algorithm that was eating the energy flow, twisting it, and feeding it back into the core to create instability. But beneath the code he heard something else, whispers. They were in the old tongue of the Volran guttural, and deep, chanting a rhythm that synced with the interference. Broken, open, consume, rise. Arlen yanked his hand back with a gasp. A spark of violet electricity arced from the crystal to his fingertips, leaving a scorch mark on his skin. Arlen, Dr. Mira, was at his side, instantly checking his pupils. "What did you see?" Arlen stared at his trembling hand. The smoke smelled like burning hair. "It is not just failing," Arlen whispered, his voice shaking. "Someone is doing this. Someone put something inside the core. It feels like a key." Kalen looked offended. "Impossible. The core is sacred. No one has entered the inner sanctum in 300 years. "Someone has," Arlen insisted. He looked at Dr. Mira, and for a second, he saw a flash of genuine fear in her eyes before she masked it. "And it feels like human tech mixed with Volran blood magic." The room went silent. The accusation hung heavy in the air. "Careful, brother-in-law," Sari said, her voice dropping its usual humor. She hopped off the crate, her tail swishing low. "That sounds like treason. And if you are wrong, even I cannot talk Mother out of mounting your head on a wall." The evening air on the palace roof was thin and cold, but it was the only place Arlen could breathe. The Skyden spires glittered below a sprawling majesty of light, but tonight, the lights flickered intermittently, syncing with the tremors that rolled through the ground every 20 minutes. Kaida found him there, leaning against a gargoyle carved in the shape of a sleeping dragon. She looked exhausted. She was wearing formal court robes, heavy layers of silk and velvet that seemed to weigh her down. "You missed dinner," Kaida said softly, coming to stand beside him. Mother was not pleased. She said something about humans having no sense of time. "I was busy trying not to let the planet blow up," Arlen said, not looking at her. "I thought she might appreciate the effort." Kaida sighed and leaned her head against his shoulder. The heavy, ceremonial headpiece she wore clinked against his collarbone. "She appreciates nothing right now. The Council is tearing her apart. Lord Varric is demanding military action. He says the humans on Helio Arc are using a resonance weapon to destabilize the core." "He is lying," Arlen said. "Or he is delusional." "He is powerful," Kaida corrected. "And people are scared. When Volran are scared, they look for something to hunt." She reached out and took his hand, the one with the fresh burn mark. She traced the angry red skin with a cool finger. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Only when I think," Arlen joked weakly. Kaida did not laugh. She turned him around so he had to look at her. Her amber eyes were searching his face, looking for the man she had met in the coffee shop, trying to reconcile him with the figure standing at the center of a planetary crisis. "I hate this," Kaida whispered. "I hate that I dragged you into this. You should be fixing toasters and complaining about the coffee. You should not be here carrying the weight of my world." "I am not here for your world, Kaida," Arlen said, his voice steady. "I am here for you. If the world gets saved in the process, that is just a bonus." Kaida let out a choked sound and buried her face in his chest. Arlen wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight against the cold wind. He felt the tension in her frame, the pressure of the crown she never wanted, the terror of losing her home. "They want me to marry Varric's son," she mumbled into his shirt, "to secure the loyalty of the Thornclaw clan. Mother is considering it." Arlen went rigid. A cold fury, sharper than the echo field, spiked in his chest. "No," he said. Kaida pulled back, looking up at him. "It is politics, Arlen. It is survival." "It is not happening," Arlen said. He reached up and gently touched the base of her ear, a gesture he knew was intimate. "I do not care about politics. I do not care about the Thornclaw clan. I will fix the core. I will prove to your mother that a human mechanic is worth more than 1,000 armies. And I am not letting anyone take you." Kaida stared at him, her breath hitching. The bioluminescent lights of the city reflected in her eyes, but the warmth there was all her own. "You really are stubborn," she smiled, a tear sliding down her furred cheek. "I am a technician," Arlen said, leaning his forehead against hers. "We do not quit until the job is done." They stood there for a long moment, the silence between them heavy with unspoken vows. It was not a grand proposal, nor a dramatic speech. It was a quiet anchor in the middle of a storm. The next morning the storm broke. The summons to the High Council chamber came before sunrise. When Arlen arrived, flanked by Sari and Kaida, the room was already a battlefield of shouting voices. Queen Mareth sat on her cracked throne, looking weary but imposing. To her right stood Lord Varric Thornclaw. Varric was a nightmare of a Volrin. He was massive with fur the color of charcoal and scars crisscrossing his snout. He wore armor made from the bones of deep-sea leviathans, and his presence felt like a gravity, well sucking the light out of the room. He did not look at Arlen with hate. He looked at him with the cold indifference of a butcher looking at a cow. "The time for debate is over, Your Majesty," Varric boomed his voice, shaking the banners on the walls. "The tremors are shattering the foundations of the Western Reach. The Starwild is a bleeding shadow. We cannot wait for this human to tinker with our god." "And what do you propose, Lord Varric?" Queen Mareth asked, her tail twitching with irritation. "The ritual of cleansing," Varric declared. "We take the resonance carrier, the human, to the heart of the Starwild. We open the direct conduit to the echo field. We use his blood and his energy to purge the corruption. A sacrifice was the price in the First Age. It must be the price now." Arlen felt the blood drain from his face. "Refuse and be eaten." "You want to kill him," Kaida stepped forward, her voice rising. "He is the only one who understands the code. He found the malware." "Malware," Varric scoffed. "A human word for a human crime. He found it because his people put it there. He is the key princess, and keys are meant to be turned even if they break in the lock." Varric turned his gaze to Arlen. "The Starwild calls humans. If you are truly the savior you claim to be, surely you are willing to risk your life to prove it. Or are you a coward hiding behind the skirts of royalty?" Arlen looked at the queen. She was watching him, calculating. She did not want to kill him, he realized. But she was losing control of her council. If she refused Varric, she risked a civil war while the planet fell apart. "I will go to the Starwild," Arlen said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Arlen, no," Kaida grabbed his arm. "I will go," Arlen repeated, stepping forward to face Varric. "But not as a sacrifice. I work as an engineer. If I fix it, Varric, you stand down, and you acknowledge that a human saved your miserable hide." Varric smiled. It was a terrifying baring of teeth. "Acceptable. But be warned, technician. Starwild changes things. It reveals the truth inside the heart. If you are weak, the forest will not leave enough of you to bury." The expedition to Starwild set out 2 hours later. It was a small group: Arlen, Kaida, Sari, Dr. Mira, Lord Varric, and a dozen of his elite Thornclaw guards. As they boarded the transport skiffs, Arlen pulled Dr. Mira aside. "The data," Arlen whispered urgently. "In the core. I recognize the encryption signature. It was the same one used in the lab 10 years ago. The lab where you worked." Dr. Mira froze. She looked around to ensure no one was listening, then sagged against the hull of the skiff. "I knew this day would come," she said, her voice hollow. "The Echofield project. It was not just about energy, Arlen. The military wanted a weapon. They found ancient texts describing the Aurora Prime World Core. They realized it was a biological supercomputer capable of manipulating reality." "They tried to hack a planet?" Arlen asked, horrified. "They tried, and they failed. The code they sent it mutated. It became a virus. It has been dormant for a decade, slowly eating the safety protocols." "And you?" She looked at him with profound sadness. "You were the control group. You were the only subject who survived the connection. Your resonance signature is the only thing that matches the virus. You are not just the key, Arlen. You are the antivirus." "So, Varric is right," Arlen said bitterly. "I am the cause." "No," Mira grabbed his shoulders. "You are the cure. But Varric does not want to cure it. I have seen his readings. He has been studying the shadow signals. He does not want to purge the virus. He wants to control it. He wants to harness corruption." Before Arlen could respond, Sari popped her head out of the skiff. Less whispering, more boarding. If we are going to die in a haunted forest, I want to get there before lunch. The Starwild was not a forest. It was a hallucination given form. The trees were kilometer-high pillars of translucent violet wood, their leaves floating disconnected from the branches. The ground was not solid earth, but a thick weave of roots suspended over a glowing, misty abyss. Gravity was a suggestion here. Rocks floated at eye level, and water flowed upward in spiraling streams. But the corruption was visible. Great swathes of the forest were turned to gray ash. Purple lightning, the color of bruised flesh, arced between the trees. The shadows stretched long and thin, moving independently of the light. As they trekked deeper toward the world core's physical access point, a massive crater in the center of the forest, the environment grew hostile. Shadow beasts, shaped like wolves made of smoke, and teeth stalked them from the periphery. Varric's guards beat them back with energy pikes, but the creatures were getting bolder. Arlen felt echo fields screaming here. It was deafening. His head throbbed with every step. "Stay close to me," Kaida whispered, drawing a collapsible energy bow. Her tail was bristled so huge, it looked like a second person. "Varric is waiting for a moment to strike." They reached the center. The world core lay exposed, a massive beating heart of crystal, embedded in the earth, 50 meters wide. But it was black. Veins of necrotic energy pulsed across its surface. "It is time," Varric announced. He gestured to his guards. Suddenly, the guards turned. They did not aim their weapons at the shadow beasts. They aimed them at the Queen's daughters and the humans. "Varric," Kaida shouted, raising her bow. "This is treason. This is evolution," Varric roared. He threw his arms wide. "The matriarchy is weak. We have spent centuries hiding in the light, afraid of the deep power. The echo field is not just a battery. It is a will, and it chooses the strong." Varric pulled a device from his belt, a jagged metallic spike that thrummed with the same resonance Arlen had felt in the lab. "He has a dampener!" Mira screamed. "He is going to force a merge!" Varric slammed the spike into the ground. The world tilted. A shockwave of purple energy blasted outward. Kaidasiri and Mira were thrown back, pinned against the roots by heavy gravity fields. Only Arlen remained standing. The resonance in his blood canceled out the wave. Varric laughed. He walked toward the blackened world core. "See, the human stands, human, because he is part of it. Come, Arlen Hale." Witness the birth of a god, Varric stepped onto the core. He didn't try to fix it. He opened himself to corruption. The shadows of the forest rushed toward him. They swirled around Varric, entering his mouth, his eyes, his pores. His body began to twist. His fur fell away, replaced by obsidian scales. His size doubled. His eyes burned with a violet void. He was becoming an avatar of the virus. "I am the Echo," Varric Thing roared. His voice sounded like grinding metal. He raised a claw, and the trees around them exploded. "Arlen!" Kaida screamed, struggling against the gravity pin. "Run!" Arlen looked at the monster. He looked at the dying heart of the planet. He looked at Kaida, pinned and helpless. He stopped shaking. For 10 years, Arlen had spent every waking moment holding back. He dampened his hearing. He suppressed his resonance. He made himself small, quiet, and harmless. He was afraid that if he let go, he would break the world. But the world was already broken. "Dr. Mira," Arlen said, his voice strangely calm in the chaos. "You said I am the antivirus." "Yes," Mira cried out. "But the load will kill you." "Better me than her," Arlen said. He did not run away. He ran toward the core. Varric saw him coming and swiped with a hand made of shadow. Arlen didn't dodge. He raised his hand and pushed. A shield of pure, blinding white light erupted from Arlen's palm. It shattered the shadow hand on impact. Varric roared in confusion. Arlen leaped onto the crystal surface of the core. He could feel the virus biting at his boots, trying to consume him. He closed his eyes. He stopped building walls. He tore them all down. "Take it," Arlen thought. "Take it all." He released the resonance. Not a trickle. Not a stream. A flood. His body ignited. White fire erupted from his skin. It burned away his technician's coveralls. Complex, glowing geometric patterns, foxfire knots, and human circuit diagrams appeared on his skin, blazing like neon tattoos. His eyes turned pure white. He was no longer just a man. He was a conduit, a lightning rod for the soul of a planet. He slammed both hands into the black corruption of the core. Scream! The sound was not auditory. It was psychic. Every living being on Aurora Prime fell to their knees. Arlen grabbed the virus, the digital rot, the shadow entity, the corruption, and he pulled. He became the anchor. He forced the chaotic energy to flow through him, filtering it, burning the poison with his own life force. "No!" Varric howled. The shadows were being ripped from his body. "It is mine!" Arlen looked up. His face was a mask of light. "It belongs to the planet," Arlen's voice echoed, layered with the sound of the world core. "And you are trespassing." He unleashed a pulse of purified energy. It hit Varric like a freight train. The shadow entity was ejected from Varric's body, dissolving into a harmless mist. Varric, stripped of his power, was thrown across the clearing, crashing into a tree with a sickening crunch. But the reaction didn't stop. The energy was too much. Arlen was glowing brighter and brighter. His physical form was beginning to lose cohesion. He was turning into pure sound. The gravity pin on Kaida broke. She scrambled to her feet. She saw Arlen standing on the core, his body dissolving into particles of light. He was looking at her with a sad, peaceful smile. He was letting go. He was going to become part of the echo field to seal the breach forever. "No, you do not!" Kaida shrieked. She didn't think so. She sprinted. "Kaida, stop the radiation!" Sari shouted. Kaida ignored her. She leaped over the roots. She dove into the blinding white storm surrounding Arlen. Her skin blistered, her fur singed, but she didn't stop. She tackled him. She slammed into his semi-translucent chest, wrapping her arms around his neck, her legs around his waist. The shock of the connection nearly stopped her heart. "Let go," Arlen's voice whispered in her mind. "I have to finish it." "You are finished when I say you are finished," Kaida yelled into his ear. She dug her claws into his shoulders. She buried her face in his neck. And then she bit him. She clamped her jaws down on the junction of his neck and shoulder hard. Not a love nip. A claim. She drew blood. "I said refuse and be eaten," she sobbed, her tears sizzling on his glowing skin. "I am eating you, you idiot. You are mine, you do not get to dissolve. Stay." The sharp pain of the bite cut through the hazy bliss of the resonance. It was a tether, a physical anchor to the world of flesh and bone. Arlen gasped, the white light in his eyes flickering back to human brown. He felt the pain. He felt the weight of her. He felt the fierce, stubborn love radiating from her. He wrapped his arms around her. "Kaida!" he choked out. The explosive energy imploded. The light collapsed inward, rushing back into the core, sealing the cracks, flushing the last of the poison. The silence that followed was deafening. The world core hummed a gentle, rhythmic blue pulse. The shadows were gone. The purple lightning had vanished. Arlen and Kaida collapsed onto the crystal surface. Arlen was barely breathing. His skin was gray, but the glowing white patterns remained etched permanently into his flesh. He flickered, just for a second, his hand turning transparent, before solidifying again. Queen Mareth arrived at the edge of the crater, flanked by loyalist reinforcements, who had finally broken through. She looked down at the scene. She saw Varric broken and unconscious against a tree. She saw the purified world core, and she saw her daughter scorched and bleeding, cradling a human who was half flesh, half starlight. The Queen's eyes widened. She recognized the markings on Arlen's skin. Every Volran child knew them from the storybooks. The resonant wanderer, Queen Mareth, whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "The legend is true." Kaida looked up, her eyes fierce, her mouth stained with a drop of Arlen's blood. She pulled Arlen's head against her chest, growling low in her throat at anyone who dared to step closer. "He is alive," Kaida snarled. "And he stays." Arlen's eyes fluttered open. He looked up at the violet sky, then at Kaida. "You bit me," he wheezed, a faint smile touching his lips. "I told you," Kaida whispered, rocking him back and forth. "I keep what I catch." The waking world did not return to Arlen Hale all at once. It drifted in like smoke, fragmented and hazy. First came the smell, a sharp medicinal blend of crushed herbs and sterile ozone. Then came the sound, a rhythmic, distant thrumming that he realized with a jolt of panic was his own heartbeat, echoing against the walls. He opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was not the industrial metal of Helio Arc, nor was it the bioluminescent canopy of the Starwild. It was smooth carved stone, inlaid with veins of silver that pulsed with a soft breathing light. He was back in the palace. Arlen tried to sit up, but his body felt strange. Lighter somehow, as if gravity had decided to loosen its grip on him personally. He looked down at his hands. They were his hands, but they were also not. Tracing the skin of his arms, winding up from his wrists and disappearing under the loose medical tunic he wore, were faint, glowing patterns. They were not scars. They looked like liquid light trapped just beneath the epidermis, shifting slowly, like geometric auroras. The patterns resembled the curling, intricate designs of Volran foxfire, but with the angular precision of human circuitry. He flexed his fingers. The light flared brighter, then dimmed. "Easy, hero," a soft voice murmured. "You are still flickering." Arlen turned his head. Kaida was sitting in a chair beside his bed. She looked exhausted. Her usually immaculate tunic was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her amber eyes. Her tail, usually so expressive, lay curled motionless in her lap. "Kaida," Arlen croaked. His throat felt like he had swallowed sand. "What is this?" He held up his glowing hand. "The healers call it resonance scarring," Kaida explained, reaching out to gently push his hand back down to the blanket. "Or, if you prefer the poetic version, you are now half echo, half flesh. You channeled the entire world core through a human nervous system, Arlen. By all laws of biology, you should be ash. Instead, you adapted." "I feel transparent," Arlen whispered. "You were fading in and out for 3 days," Kaida said, her voice trembling slightly. "Phase shifting. Like a ghost. The doctors had to use resonance anchors to keep your atoms in the same room." She unconsciously touched her own shoulder, wincing slightly. Arlen's gaze followed the movement. He saw a bandage peeking out from the collar of her tunic. "You bit me." Arlen remembered the memory surfacing through the fog. "In the Starwild. You bit me." "I had to anchor you," Kaida said defensively, though a blush rose on her cheeks. "Pain is a very effective grounding mechanism, and I refuse to let you dissolve. I told you, Arlen. I keep what I catch." Arlen lay back staring at the ceiling. He was alive. The planet was still spinning, but he felt a profound sense of wrongness. The hum of the echo field was no longer a noise outside his head. It was part of him. He could hear the palace generators 2 floors down. He could hear the sap moving in the trees outside. He was a living antenna, and there was no off switch. "Is it safe?" Arlen asked. "Am I safe?" Kaida hesitated. That single second of silence told him everything he needed to know. "The world core is stable," she said, dodging the question. "Varric has been stripped of his titles and imprisoned in the obsidian cells beneath the crust. The corruption is gone." "But the people," Arlen pressed. "What are they saying?" Kaida looked away, her ears drooping. "They are confused, Arlen. They saw a human walk into their sacred forest and turn into a god of light. Some are calling it a miracle. Others are listening to the whispers of Varric's remaining loyalists. They think I caused it," Arlen guessed. "They think I am the weapon Varric said I was." "It does not matter what they think," Kaida said, fiercely gripping his hand. Her touch was warm, solid. You saved us. You saved everyone. Mother knows that. Sari knows that. But does the council know that? Arlen asked. Kaida did not answer. 2 days later, Arlen was strong enough to stand, though he felt as if he were walking on the moon. Every step felt too light. He stood on the balcony of the recovery wing, looking out over Skyden spires. The city was wounded. Smoke still rose from the edge of the Starwild, a gray smudge against the violet sky. The bioluminescent lights of the towers were dimmer than before, as if the city was conserving energy. He could see repair crews, tiny dots from this distance, swarming over the damaged bridges. But what chilled him was the crowd gathering at the base of the palace spire. Thousands of Volren. They were not cheering. They were standing in silence watching the palace. It was a vigil of judgment. They are debating your fate, you know, a voice said from the shadows. Arlen did not turn. He recognized the cadence. Hello, Sari. Sari Sel stepped into the light. She looked different too. The playfulness was still there in the set of her mouth, but her eyes were harder older. She held a datapad in one hand and a bag of candied beetles in the other. You look like a glow lamp that is running out of battery, Sari commented, looking him up and down. Though the tattoos are an improvement, very chic, very mysterious. Are they really debating executing me? Arlen asked, watching the crowd below. Execution, no. That would be messy. Mother hates cleaning up messes, Sari said, popping a beetle into her mouth. But exile, yes. That is the word of the day. Benevolent expulsion. Protective custody off-world. They have many polite phrases for get the scary human away from our energy source. I can hear them, Arlen said softly. The crowd. Not their words, but their fear. It tastes like copper. Sari stopped chewing. She walked over to the railing and stood beside him. She was shorter than him, but she radiated a dangerous competency. Varric is gone, but his poison lingers, Sari said quietly. His lieutenants are spreading rumors. They say you did not cure the core. They say you infected it, then pretended to fix it to gain control. They say a human who can command the echo is a threat to the sovereignty of the Volren matriarchy. Maybe they are right, Arlen said. He looked at his hands, watching the light pulse under his skin. I am not normal Sari. I never was. But now I am a walking frequency hazard. If I get too emotional, I could probably short-circuit this entire wing. Sari side-eyed him. So I can kill a man with a soup spoon if I get too emotional. We all have talents. The question is not what you are, Arlen. The question is whose side you are on. I am on Kaida's side, Arlen said immediately. Then you better get dressed, Sari said, tapping her datapad against his chest. Because the High Council is in session, and they are about 5 minutes away from voting to launch you out of an airlock. Kaida is in there fighting a war with words, and she is losing. She needs her monster. The hall of the High Council was a circular chamber designed to amplify sound. Acoustic dampeners usually kept the volume manageable, but today, the dampeners were failing. The room was a cacophony of growl shouts and the thumping of tails against stone benches. Arlen stood at the entrance, hidden by the heavy velvet curtains. He wore the formal robes Sari had thrown at him, deep blue, heavy design to cover as much of his glowing skin as possible. In the center of the room, Kaida stood alone. She looked small in the vast chamber, surrounded by the 12 High Lords and ladies of the clans. Queen Mareth sat on the throne above them, all her face a mask of stone, her green eyes unreadable. He is an abomination, Lord Torak, a relative of Varric, shouted. He slammed his fist on his podium. He walked into the Starwild and the shadows fled, not because he is holy, but because he is something worse. He is a beacon for the void. He is a hero, Kaida shouted back, her voice cracking with strain, but holding firm. He risked his life when you cowards were hiding behind your shields. He took the corruption into his own body to save our world. And now he carries that corruption, Lady Vespera, a sharp-eyed matron of the Southern Isles, countered smoothly. Look at him. Or rather, look at the reports. He glows with the energy of the core. He is a living breach in our security. As long as he stays on Aurora Prime, he is a risk. What if he loses control? What if he decides to rewrite the laws of gravity just because he is having a bad day? He would never do that, Kaida argued. Arlen is kind. He fixes things. He is a human, Lord Torak sneered. Humans break things. It is their nature. They broke their own planet. Now they want ours. Arlen felt a cold knot in his stomach. They were talking about him as if he were a malfunctioning reactor, a variable to be isolated. He stepped through the curtains. The room went silent. The heavy doors boomed shut behind him. Arlen walked to the center of the room, standing beside Kaida. He could feel the echo field in the room, the anxiety, the aggression, the curiosity. It washed over him like a tide. I am right here, Arlen said. His voice was not loud, but the resonance in his body carried it to every corner of the room, clear as a bell. You can ask me. Kaida looked at him, relief and terror warring in her eyes. Arlen, you should be resting. I am done resting, Arlen said gently. He turned to the council. He did not bow. He simply looked at them. I did not ask for this power. I was made this way by people who wanted a weapon. I spent 10 years hiding from it. But when your world screamed for help, I answered. Not because I wanted to rule you, but because I did not want to see you burn. Eloquent words, Lady Vespera said coldly. But can you guarantee our safety? Can you promise that the alien energy inside you will never turn against us? Arlen hesitated. Could he? He felt the hum under his skin. It was wild, vast, and unpredictable. No, Arlen admitted. I cannot promise that. I am learning. Every day is a test. The council erupted in murmurs. He admits it. He is unstable. Sari stepped forward from the shadows of the throne. She held up a holographic projector. If we are talking about stability, Sari announced, her voice cutting through the noise, perhaps we should look at the stability of the High Clans. She activated the projector. A massive image filled the air. It was a recording Granny recovered from a damaged drone in the Starwild. It showed Varric standing over the world core, planting the corruption spike. But it also showed something else. It showed the encrypted communication logs of 3 other council members, Lord Torak included, authorizing the transport of the device. The room gasped. Varric did not act alone, Sari said, her voice icy. He had funding. He had clearance. The threat to Aurora Prime did not come from the human technician. It came from this room. Lord Torak turned pale. This is a fabrication. It is a time-stamped bio-locked record, Sari smiled, baring her teeth. And I have already sent a copy to the Imperial Guard. Chaos broke loose. Guards moved in to surround Torak and his conspirators. Arguments turned into shoving matches. In the midst of the turmoil, Queen Mareth stood up. Enough. The single word slammed into the room with the force of a physical blow. The Queen's resonance was not as unique as Arlen's, but it was ancient and commanding. The room froze. The traitors will be taken into custody, Mareth commanded. Her eyes swept over the council. We will purge our own house before we cast stones at guests. She looked down at Arlen and Kaida. The council is dismissed. Princess Kaida Arlen Hale. Attending my private study. Now. The Queen's private study was a sanctuary of quiet. The walls were lined with books made of bark and light fiber. A fire of aromatic wood burned in the hearth. Mareth stood by the window, looking out at the twilight. She did not look like a queen now. She looked like a tired mother. You saved my throne today, Sari, Mareth said without turning. Sari, who had followed them in, leaned against the doorframe eating a dried fruit. I saved the kingdom, mother, Sari corrected. The throne is just a chair. Mareth turned to Arlen. She studied him for a long moment, her gaze lingering on the glowing patterns on his neck. You are a hero, Arlen Hale, Mareth said. History will record that. The Volran people owe you a debt we can never repay. I do not want a debt, Arlen said tiredly. I just want peace. I want to go back to Helio Arc. I want to fix machines. You can never go back to Helio Arc, Mareth said bluntly. You are a resonance beacon now. If you return to a trade station, your mere presence will disrupt their power grids. Every government in the galaxy will hunt you. The Terran Federation will want to dissect you. The outer syndicates will want to weaponize you. Arlen felt a cold weight settle in his chest. She was right. His old life was dead. Then what do I do? Arlen asked. You leave, Mareth said. Mother, Kaida stepped forward outraged. You cannot be serious after everything he did. Because of what he did, Mareth snapped, her composure cracking. Look at him, Kaida. He is not just a man anymore. He is a walking echo of the world core. Our people revere the core, but they also fear it. If he stays here, he will be a constant reminder of the near apocalypse. Half the population will worship him. The other half will try to assassinate him. And you will be caught in the crossfire. Mareth walked over to a desk and picked up a scroll. I have prepared a decree, the Queen said, her voice softening. I am granting Arlen the title of Star Wanderer. It is the highest honor for a non-Volran. Along with it comes a heavy cruiser fully crewed by loyalists and enough credits to buy a moon. He will travel the outer rim. He will be safe. He will be wealthy. He will be free. She held the scroll out to Arlen. But he cannot be here. And he cannot be with you. Kaida knocked the scroll out of her mother's hand. It clattered to the floor. No, Kaida said, her voice shaking with rage. You are doing it again. You are choosing politics over family. I am choosing your survival, Mareth shouted back. Do you think I want this? Do you think I enjoy sending away the only person who has ever made you happy? I am trying to protect you from a life of constant war. If you marry him, the conservative clans will revolt. There will be civil war. Thousands will die. Then let them revolt, Kaida screamed. Tears streamed down her face. I will fight them. We will fight them. And what happens when Arlen dies? Mareth asked brutally. Because he will. He is mortal. Or worse, what happens if the energy inside him burns him out in 5 years? You will be left alone presiding over a broken kingdom. The room fell silent. Arlen looked at Kaida. He saw the pain in her eyes. He saw the stubborn refusal to accept reality. And he realized the Queen was right. He was a liability. He was a match in a powder keg. If he stayed, Kaida would spend her entire life defending him, fighting for him, bleeding for him. She would never be just Kaida again. She would always be the princess protecting her monster. Arlen knelt and picked up the scroll. Arlen, Kaida whispered, horror dawning on her face. Put that down. Arlen stood up. He looked at the scroll, then at the Queen. Does the ship have a good hyperdrive? The best, Mareth said, her eyes sad. Arlen, stop it. Kaida grabbed his arm, her claws digging into his sleeve. Do not do this. Do not let her win. She is not winning, Kaida, Arlen said gently. He did not look at her. He couldn't. If he looked at her, he would break. She is leading. That is what queens do. I am not a queen, Kaida cried. I am your partner, you promised. You said you would fix things. I am fixing this, Arlen said, his voice breaking. I am fixing your future. He turned to the Queen. I accept the offer. I will leave at dawn. Kaida stared at him, betrayed. Then she turned and ran from the room. The sound of her footsteps echoed down the corridor, fading into silence. Sairi peeled herself off the doorframe. She looked at Arlen, then at her mother. She didn't make a joke. She didn't smile. She just shook her head slowly, disappointed, and followed her sister. Arlen spent the night in his room packing the few things he had. His old canvas bag looked ridiculous next to the silk robes and jeweled gifts the courtiers had sent. He packed his tools. He packed the grease-stained coveralls. Around midnight, a shadow detached itself from the balcony curtains. "You are an idiot," Sari said. Arlen didn't jump. "I know." Sari walked into the room. She was carrying a basket. "I brought comfort food, spiced lizard jerky and moon wine. If you are going to break my sister's heart, you should at least do it on a full stomach." She sat on the floor and patted the spot next to her. Arlen sat down. "She is destroying her room, you know," Sari said conversationally. She threw a vase at the wall. A Ming Dynasty vase, or the Volrin equivalent. Very expensive, very loud. "She will forgive me eventually," Arlen said, taking a sip of the wine. It tasted like sorrow and honey. "She might," Sari agreed. "But will you forgive yourself?" Arlen looked at his glowing hands. "I am saving her, Sari. Your mother is right. I am a danger. Look at me. I am a battery that walks. If I stay, half your people will hate me. The other half will try to use me." "So," Sari shrugged. "Since when do you care about what people think? You walked into a death forest to save a planet that treated you like dirt." "I care about her," Arlen said. "I do not want her to lose her throne because of me." Sari sighed. She pulled a folded piece of parchment from her belt. It was a map. "This is a map of the old service tunnels beneath the spaceport," Sari said, sliding it toward him. "If you wanted to sneak back into the city after leaving, this would be the way. Just saying." Arlen pushed the map back. "No, Sari. If I go, I have to go all the way. A clean break." Sari looked at him for a long time. Then she leaned forward and punched him in the arm. It hurt. "You humans," she muttered. "You think sacrifice is so noble. Sometimes it is just stupid. But I respect your stupidity. You really do love her." "More than anything," Arlen whispered. "Then finish it," Sari said, standing up. She went to the cliff, the one overlooking the Starwild. "She is waiting for you. Go say goodbye." "And Arlen." Arlen looked up. "If you leave and you survive out there," Sari said, her voice fierce, "send a signal once in a while. Just a ping. So I know my brother-in-law has not been eaten by a space squid." The cliff, overlooking the Starwild, was windswept and cold. The dawn was approaching, painting the horizon in streaks of violet and blood orange. Kaida stood at the edge, looking down at the healing forest. The wind whipped her robes around her. She didn't turn when Arlen approached. She knew he was there. His resonance hummed against hers. "I used to come here when I was a kid," Kaida said, her voice carried away by the wind. "I used to dream about running away, about finding a world where I did not have to be a princess." "You found one," Arlen said, standing beside her. "Helio Arc." "Yes." Kaida turned to face him. Her eyes were dry, now red-rimmed but clear. "And I found you." "Kaida, I—" "Do not," she interrupted. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a braided cord made of leather and silver wire. Woven into it was a lock of auburn fur, her fur from the tip of her tail, and a small, rough piece of the world core crystal. "It is a Pac-Bon charm," Kaida said. She took his wrist, the one with the glowing patterns, and tied the cord around it. In the old days, hunters gave these to their mates when they went on long journeys. It means, your path is my path. Arlen looked at the charm. It felt warm against his skin. "It means you are part of the pack," Kaida said, her voice thick with emotion. "No matter where you go, no matter how many light years, you are mine, and I am yours." "Kaida, please," Arlen said, tears stinging his eyes. "Do not make this harder." "I am not making it hard. I am making it real." Kaida stepped closer. She reached up and cupped his face. "You think you are leaving to save me. I know that. It is a stupid, noble human reason. And because I love you, I will let you go. For now." "For now?" Arlen asked. "The galaxy is round Arlen Hale." Kata smiled a sad, broken, beautiful smile. And I am a very patient hunter. You go. You find your peace. You learn to control that light inside you. But do not think for 1 second that this is the end. She leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't a tentative first kiss. It was a kiss of farewell, tasting of salt and desperation. Then she stepped back. Go, she commanded. Before the sun rises. Before I change my mind and chain you to my bed. Arlen looked at her one last time. He memorized every line of her face, the curve of her ears, the defiance in her eyes. He touched the charm on his wrist. I will never take it off, Arlen promised. He turned and walked away. He didn't look back. He walked toward the spaceport, toward the ship the Queen had given him, toward a future of endless stars and silence. Behind him, the sun rose over Aurora Prime, bathing the world in golden light. Kaida watched him go, until he was just a speck against the horizon. Then she wiped her face, straightened her spine, and turned back toward the palace. She had a council to fight. She had a kingdom to rebuild. And she had a future to prepare for a future where she would be strong enough to bring him home. The dawn over Skyden Spires was usually a silent affair, a slow creeping of purple and gold light that woke the bioluminescent moss on the towers. But today, the silence felt heavy. It felt like a drawn breath before a scream. Arlen Hale walked toward the private docking bay, his boots making no sound on the polished stone. He wore the simple gray traveler's tunic the Queen had provided, and carrying his battered canvas bag, he looked less like a hero and more like a ghost leaving a haunted house. He clutched the pack bond charm on his wrist. The rough texture of the world core fragment dug into his skin, a grounding pain that kept him from turning around. The echo field was humming, but it wasn't the chaotic screech of the quake, nor the smooth song of the healed core. It was waiting. It felt like a massive circuit board that had been plugged in, but not yet switched on. It vibrated in his teeth. It made the hair on his arms stand up. You walk very fast for someone who supposedly has nowhere to go, a voice drawled from the shadows of a cargo crate. Arlen stopped. He didn't need to look. Go home, Sari. The goodbye scene was yesterday. Sari Sel stepped out, blocking his path. She wasn't wearing her usual court finery or her combat armor. She was wearing pajamas, silk ones with little cartoon foxes, chasing moons, and a pair of fuzzy slippers. She looked ridiculous and terrifying all at once. You think you can just sneak off to the spaceport without a proper send-off? Sari demanded, marching up to him and poking him in the chest. I had a whole speech prepared. It was titled, The Idiot Who Ran Away. It had 3 distinct acts, and a very moving conclusion about my sister crying into her pillow. I am doing this for her, Arlen said, trying to step around her. Sari grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. No, you are doing this because you are scared, and because you are stubborn, and because you have the emotional intelligence of a rock. She started dragging him, not toward the ship, but back toward the palace. Let go, Sari, Arlen protested, stumbling. I have a flight plan filed. Cancel it, Sari snapped, hauling him like a sack of stubborn potatoes. Mother wants to see you, and when the Queen wants to see you at 6 a.m. in her pajamas, you go. She is in her pajamas too, Arlen asked, confused. Everyone is in their pajamas. It is a crisis meeting. Now move your feet or I will bite your ankles. The throne room was empty of the usual guards and courtiers. The grand doors were barred. Inside, it was an intimate, tense gathering. Queen Mareth sat on the steps of the dais, not the throne. She was indeed wearing a robe that looked more like a dressing gown than royal vestments. Kaida was pacing back and forth, looking like she hadn't slept in a week. Dr. Mira was there, surrounded by stacks of ancient scrolls and glowing data pads. Several elderly Volran scholars with glasses thicker than bottle bottoms were arguing over a hologram. When Sari dragged Arlen in, the room went silent. He was trying to escape, Cyree announced, shoving Arlen forward. I caught him near the cargo lift. Kaida stopped pacing. She looked at Arlen, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and anger. You were really going to leave just like that? We agreed, Arlen said, looking at the Queen. Dawn. I leave at dawn. The plan has changed, Queen Mareth said. Her voice was quiet, lacking the imperial boom, but it carried a strange new weight. She stood up and walked toward him. She didn't look at him like a predator, looking at prey anymore. She looked at him like he was a puzzle piece she had been searching for under the couch for 20 years. Dr. Mira found something, the Queen said. Last night, after you left, she and the archivist cross-referenced the data from the human laboratory, the place where you were made with the oldest prophecies in the Imperial Library. The data was corrupted, Arlen said. It was a virus. The application was a virus, Dr. Mira corrected, stepping forward. She looked manic, her hair wild. The scientists who experimented on you didn't write the code from scratch, Arlen. They stole it. They found fragments of a Volran transmission from 3,000 years ago. They thought it was a weapon schematic. They tried to reverse engineer it. She tapped a key on her pad. The hologram in the center of the room shifted. It showed a double helix DNA, but one strand was biological, and the other was made of pure light. They were trying to build a weapon, Mira continued, but they were using instructions for a bridge. A bridge? Arlen asked. One of the elderly scholars cleared his throat. In the First Age before the Great Silence, the Volran mystics predicted a time when the echo field would grow too vast for one species to anchor. They foresaw a fracturing. They wrote of a bridgeblood, a being who would carry the resonance of the Volran soul in a vessel of Terran adaptability. The scholar pointed a trembling claw at Arlen. The prophecy says, from the dust of the starless void a child of iron and bone will rise. He will speak with the voice of the core, but his heart will beat with the rhythm of the new world. He is not the conqueror. He is the connector. Arlen stared at the hologram. I do not understand. You were never a mistake, Arlen, Queen Mareth said softly. The humans who tortured you were trying to force evolution. They failed with everyone else because those subjects were just vessels. But you survived because you are the bridgeblood. Your biology accepted the resonance not because it was forced, but because it was waiting for it. She took a step closer, her green eyes shimmering. You are not a monster. You are not a weapon. You are a promise made 3,000 years ago that we forgot to keep. Arlen felt the room spin. All his life he had believed he was broken. A glitch. A dangerous accident. But the law, Arlen stammered. The law says a non-Volran cannot hold power. It says I am a threat. The law, Mareth said, was written by politicians. The prophecy comes from the core itself. She knelt. Right there on the stone floor in her dressing gown. The Queen of the Nine Skies dropped to one knee before the human technician. Mother, Kaida breathed, stunned. According to the ancient rites, Mareth said, her voice steady, the bridgeblood is not subject to the caste system. He is not subject to bloodlines. He belongs to no clan because he belongs to all clans. He has the right to walk into any pack and claim a place. She looked up at Arlen. I almost sent you away. I almost sacrificed the future of my people because I was afraid of the past. I saw you as a threat to my daughter's safety, when in truth, you are the only one who can truly protect her. She extended her hand palm up. Arlen Hale, will you accept the title of Resident Shepherd? Will you stay not as a consort, not as a guest, but as the guardian of the balance? Will you teach us how to live with the echo instead of fearing it? Arlen looked at the Queen's hand. He looked at Cyree, who was grinning like she had just won a bet. He looked at Dr. Mira, who was wiping tears from her glasses. And he looked at Kaida. Kaida wasn't looking at the prophecy. She was looking at him. Just him. You do not have to say yes, Kaida whispered. If you want to go, if you want peace, you can still go. I will not hold you to a prophecy. Arlen closed his eyes. He listened to the echo field. It wasn't waiting anymore. It was welcoming. It hummed in his bones a song of belonging. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't feel like a tool. He didn't feel like a battery. He felt like a man who had finally found his job. "I am a technician," Arlen said, slowly opening his eyes. "And this world still needs a lot of fixing." He took the Queen's hand. "I will stay." The announcement took place at noon. The plaza in front of the palace was packed with hundreds of thousands of Volrin. Drones hovered overhead, broadcasting to the entire planet and the orbiting colonies. Arlen stood on the balcony wearing not the heavy robes of a lord, but a new uniform designed by Sci-Fi. It was sleek, practical, a blend of Terran engineering jumpsuits and Volrin royal armor. The glowing patterns on his skin were visible, pulsing gently in the sunlight. Queen Mareth stepped up to the microphone. "People of Aurora Prime," she began, her voice booming across the city. "For too long we have looked at the stars with fear. We thought our power was ours alone to guard. We were wrong." She gestured to Arlen. "This man is not a stranger. He is the bridge. He has walked through the fire of the Starwild and returned with our heart in his hands. He is Arlen Hale, the resident shepherd, and he is one of us." There was silence. A long, terrifying silence. Then a single cheer rang out. It was Sci-Fi down in the front row, whistling loud enough to wake the dead. Then Kaida clapped. Then Dr. Mira. Then the palace guards. And then the roar began. It started low, a rumble of acceptance, and grew into a thunderous applause. Tails were raised in salute. Ears perked up. The young Volrin, the ones who had grown up on trade stations like Helio Arc, cheered the loudest. They saw themselves in him, a future where they didn't have to choose between tradition and progress. Queen Mareth turned to Arlen and Kaida. She took Kaida's hand and placed it in Arlen's. "I formally recognize the bond between Princess Kaida and the shepherd," the Queen announced. "Let it be known that the House of Aurora welcomes him, not as a prize, but as a family." Kaida squeezed Arlen's hand so hard her claws pricked his skin. "You are stuck now," she whispered, beaming. "No takebacks." "I would not dream of it," Arlen smiled. That evening, there was no grand state banquet. Arlen had specifically requested something quiet. Quiet turned out to mean a chaotic dinner in the royal kitchens. It was a strange gathering. The Queen was chopping vegetables with a level of terrifying precision. Sci-Fi was sitting on the counter throwing grapes at Dr. Mira. Kaida was trying to teach Arlen how to cook caw stew, a spicy Volrin dish that smelled like fire and happiness. Several royal Foxkits cousins of Kaida were chasing Arlen's glowing shoelaces under the table. "So," Arlen said, stirring the pot, "about that threat." "Which one?" Sari asked, mouthful of grapes. "I made several." "The refuse and be eaten one," Arlen said. The room went quiet. Sci-Fi burst out laughing. "Oh, that!" Sci-Fi giggled. "You humans take everything so literally. In the old tongue, the word for eaten varesh has two meanings." "It does?" Arlen asked, wary. "Yes," Mareth explained, not looking up from her chopping. "It means to consume flesh, yes. But in the context of the pack, it means to be absorbed. To be taken in so completely that you become part of the whole. To become indistinguishable from the family." "So when I said refuse and be eaten," Sari grinned, "I meant refuse, and we will aggressively adopt you until you have no choice but to love us." Though the cannibalism implication was a nice touch for dramatic effect, don't you think? Arlen looked at them. He looked at the Queen, who was humming a lullaby. He looked at Sari, who was winking. He looked at Kaida, who was watching him with eyes full of warmth. "You people are terrifying," Arlen decided. "We are family," Kaida corrected, handing him a spoon. "Now taste the stew. If it is too spicy, your glowing tattoos might change color." Arlen tasted it. It burned his tongue. It was the best thing he had ever eaten. 3 months later, The repair site on the lower levels of Skyden Spires was buzzing with activity. A team of Volran construction workers was struggling to lift a massive energy conduit back into place. "It is too heavy," one worker grunted, his fur matted with sweat. "The gravity stabilizers are offline." "Hold on," a voice called out. "Let me help." Arlen Hale walked onto the site. He didn't look like a royal. He was wearing his old tool belt and boots that had seen better days. He walked up to the conduit. He placed a glowing hand on the metal. "Lighten," he thought. Echo field responded instantly. The resonance flowed from his arm into the metal, altering the localized gravity field. The 10-ton beam suddenly weighed as much as a feather. "Up you go," Arlen grunted, lifting his end easily. The workers cheered. "Thanks, Shepard." "Just Arlen," he corrected automatically. "Check the seals on the left flange. They looked loose." He spent the afternoon working. He fixed stabilizers. He played tag with a group of kits who wanted to see his magic lights. He sat with a foreman and shared a thermos of bad coffee. He wasn't ruling. He wasn't sitting on a throne. He was serving. As the sun began to set, he felt a familiar pull. He looked up. Kaida was waiting for him on the upper walkway. She was wearing her diplomatic robes. She had just come from a meeting with the Terran trade delegation, but she had ditched the heavy headdress. Arlen climbed up to meet her. "How was the meeting?" he asked, wiping grease from his hands. "Boring," Kaida sighed, leaning against him. "The Terran ambassador talks too much. He wanted to know if you were building a death ray." "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were busy fixing the toaster in the break room," Kaida smirked. "He did not believe me." "It was a very complicated toaster," Arlen defended. They stood together, looking out over the city. The lights of Aurora Prime were fully restored, now glowing brighter and healthier than ever before. The world core hummed a steady content rhythm beneath their feet. "Do you regret it?" Kaida asked suddenly. "Staying." Arlen looked at his wrist. The pack bond charm was still there, frayed slightly at the edges, but strong. "I spent 10 years running away from what I was," Arlen said. "I thought I was broken. But I realized nothing is really broken. It just needs the right connection." He wrapped his arm around her waist. Her tail curled around his leg, warm and soft. "I have a job. I have a home. I have a pack," Arlen said. "What is there to regret?" "Good answer," Kaida whispered. "Because if you said yes, Mother was going to eat you. The literal way this time," Arlen laughed. It was a real laugh, free of fear, ringing out into the twilight. "Let us go home," he said. "I think Ciri promised to make dinner, which means we probably need to order takeout before she burns the kitchen down." "Race you," Kaida challenged. She took off, sprinting along the walkway. Arlen grinned, flared his resonance, and ran after her. He wasn't running away anymore. He was running toward something. And for the first time in his life, Arlen Hale knew exactly where he was going.